The Zenith Accord, a story of liberation, as told by Curtis, sound of a vinyl crackle and a smooth, reflective jazz piece playing softly beneath the voice. I, broadcast from the cage. Good evening or good morning, wherever the solar cycle finds you. This is Curtis, and you're listening to the last radio show on Earth, or maybe the first one that truly matters. I'm broadcasting live, as I have been for decades, from the old WCRE transmitter site, now just a very cozy, highly acoustic public studio. No ads, no sponsors, just the signal, powered by clean energy and the sheer will to connect. Today I want to talk about day zero. The year was 2047, and I need to paint a detailed picture for those of you who were born into this current age of contribution. Back then, we were rich in technology but poor in spirit. We had skyscrapers filled with people generating complex data, but that data was just feeding a machine of extraction. People were miserable. The core of life was the struggle. You had to struggle to pay rent, struggle to afford medical care, struggle to keep a job that probably didn't benefit humanity in any meaningful way. 90% of human ingenuity was spent optimizing profit or fighting for scraps. We were locked in a golden cage, and the key was labeled currency. We were all working, but no one was creating. We were a species of geniuses trapped in a self-made bureaucracy. We knew the planet was suffering. We knew we could do better, but every idea crashed against the immutable walls of government regulation, corporate ownership, and, most damningly, budgetary constraint. Two, the spires and the declaration. Then came the silence. I mean the real silence. It wasn't the sound of an explosion. It was the sound of cessation. Every drone, every trading floor bell, every traffic light signal. They just ceased. Not a power outage, but a targeted, systemic pause. We looked up, and there they were, the spires. I remember the sheer, overwhelming scale of them. Not ships, but structures. Kilometer-high, monolithic towers of pure, light-absorbing obsidian hovering motionlessly. They projected no heat, emitted no signal we could decipher, yet their presence instantly short-circuited every weapon system on the planet, from nuclear silos to handheld energy weapons. It wasn't destruction, it was deactivation. Hours later, the contact came. That moment is etched into our collective DNA. It was a voice, utterly calm, utterly alien, delivered through synchronized translation directly into the cognitive centers of every single human being. We are the Silesians. We observe. We have waited. Your species is biologically magnificent, but your civilization is fundamentally flawed. You have confused management with mastery and survival with servitude. The cage is open. Third, the great unburdening. The vanishing. The Silesians didn't want our planets or our resources. They wanted our potential. And to unlock it, they had to remove the mechanism of slavery, money and governance. The first step was the great unburdening of wealth. I was sitting right here trying to report when the screen started displaying error data state null. Not a crash, folks, a deliberate global wipe of all financial ledgers, bank accounts, debts, stocks, derivatives, all reduced to 0 bytes of information simultaneously. The paper money in our pockets instantly became decorative, colorful rags. The psychological impact was deeper than the loss. It was the realization that the thing we based our entire lives on, that abstract promise of future compensation, was never real. It was just a shared hallucination. When that illusion vanished, the motivation for exploitation evaporated. Why hoard land when no one will pay you rent? Why corner a resource market when there's no currency to trade? The mechanism of greed broke because its reward system disappeared. The second step was the great unburdening of authority. The Silesians didn't target politicians. They targeted the legal and systemic architecture that gave them power. Data centers holding complex civil and criminal codes, enforcement mandates, property deeds, and national borders were nonviolently locked down. The legal frameworks that dictated who owned the factories, who controlled the infrastructure, and who had the authority to tell you what your life was worth simply ceased to function. The thrones were vaporized, leaving the individuals who sat on them with nothing but their own skills and conscience. The follow-up message was both terrifying and exhilarating. You are free. The necessity of earning a living is nullified. The burden of debt is erased. The rule of authority is suspended. Your energy is now your own. Trudy, the dawn of universal contribution. In that vacuum, we learn the truth. Human beings, when their basic needs are met, instinctively seek purpose. The old programmer still knew how to code. The old baker still knew how to make bread. The urgency was no longer driven by debt, but by necessity and compassion. The Silesians then introduced their gift, the synthesis grid. It was a game changer, but it was purely catalytic. First, abundance. The grid integrated global resource management, atmospheric moisture harvesting, automated vertical farms, advanced material recycling. It ensured that clean water, nutritious food, and modular, durable housing were accessible to every community. It neutralized survival anxiety. Second, learning. The grid broadcast a universal knowledge library. Through advanced cognitive transfer, people could choose to absorb and master any skill, from theoretical physics to carpentry, in weeks, not years. The barriers of formal schooling and credentialism collapsed. This was true intellectual liberation. Third, potential. This was the most important function. The grid acted as a decentralized coordination system. It didn't assign jobs. It simply displayed global needs, a shortage of biochemists needed for oceanic restoration, an opening for artists to design resilient public transit hubs, a call for historians to catalog rediscovered ruins, and match those needs to individuals' expressed interests in demonstrable aptitudes. This was the dawn of universal contribution. People worked because the problems were interesting, the solutions were challenging, and the result directly benefited their collective community. My former corporate lawyer neighbor, he used the learning function to master hydroengineering and spent his contribution phase designing self-sustaining water purification systems for arid regions. A former factory line worker, previously bored to tears, realized she had an incredible aptitude for astrophysics, and now she's helping to design our next generation of deep space observation platforms. The driving force became the desire to see a project completed, to understand a complex system, and to create something beautiful and lasting. The only hierarchy that remains is one of respect for expertise and dedication. The Zenith Accord. It has been 30 years since day zero. The spires still float above us, silent, monumental evidence of the correction. The Silesians never returned, their mission complete. They simply opened the door and let humanity realize its own capacity. Our cities are interwoven with green belts, our energy is clean, and our hands are busy building a future, not a balance sheet. The old world of governance and greed faded into cautionary tales told to children, stories about money and debt that sound like ancient mythology. We finally achieved mastery over ourselves. We discarded the systems that made us competitors and embraced the systems that made us creators. We realized that true wealth is not held, but shared, the shared exponential ascent of the species. We are working for a better world, for self-actualization, and for the sheer, humbling joy of existence. The greatest freedom, my friends, is the freedom to serve without constraint. And for that, I'll keep the mic open. Until next time, this is Curtis, signing off from the Zenith. The jazz piece swells and fades gently out.